Good afternoon to you all on premise and online. It's good to be with you, and it's a bit strange. I'm looking at a device and I don't see any one of you, so I hope it works. Um, I'd love to be there, but I couldn't. And I'll talk you through what we do on having the Corona Check app that you all use to enter the premise. I understood, but for that, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Ron. I'm CEO and Director of Information Policy at the Ministry, and I'll talk you through what we do to, in a relatively open way, support um, the the um, um, the apps and all the things to do to get out of the pandemic we are in. I hope you see slides. I don't see any slides at all. So can I have the second slide, please? And I understand from people around here that, oh, thanks a lot for that, that the volume is a bit low. So if you can pump that up, it'll be great. But we'll talk you through that. It all started with the Dutch contact tracing app, the app called Corona Melder that started in the beginning last year with a large event in a weekend, over a weekend. We called that an appathon. And that was evaluating apps on the market for contact tracing. And the results, so the summary of the weekend were that there were many apps already in place in several countries in Europe, for example, but none of them was far enough to introduce in the Netherlands. And from that on, we decided we are going to do that ourselves. We, the government, with a lot of people from outside. Next slide, please. And we did so, and we do so in a relatively open way and with the best and the brightest. So we asked people from outside, are you willing to help? And are you willing to help us to fight the pandemic? Next slide, please. In a relatively open way, our minister was the first to push a Git commit to publish one of the websites, for example. And we did so in a relatively open way, added even the icon of Corona Melder. There were several alternatives put online, and people were able to choose the one they preferred. And that way, the actual icon of Corona Melder was influenced by designs and input from outside. Next slide, please. And radically open is the term that describes all of what we do. For example, there is a continuous scientific research going on why people use apps, the things we produce, how they use them, and if we can improve them based on research. So there's research into how people used it. There is research into the epidemic, the effect on the epidemic. And so there's continuous research and everything we do on Corona Melder, but also on Corona Check, and even mystery guests on Corona Check. You might be having a mystery guest next to you because events that use Corona Check, we send mystery guests to do research into how the app is used, and if for example, people are checked at the door as they should be. Next slide, please. Radically open also is in effect as to how we do security. For example, all the pen we do is published online at the government site. The pen test itself is standardized in a radically new way so that all pen testing we do can be compared and is standardized. And you can find those pen test reports online. And even the first pen test is published. So there is no rework done before publishing the results of a pen test. Next slide, please. We even go so far that you can verify that the app in the App Store is the same app as published. So there is a declaration that every time we publish an app, that is the same code as is available online on the GitHub of the ministry. Next slide, please. Which is true for how we ask the community to cooperate in how we develop all the things we develop. For example, the bug bounty of Corona Melder. And next slide, please. Also the results of using that app. So these are the results of Melder. That is how many people testing after getting a notification with or without complaints proved to be positive on COVID-19 or the coronavirus. So on the website coronamelder.nl, you can follow the scientific results week by week and see if it works or does not work. Next slide. So what are the main different ways we now work compared to how government normally works? First of all, I have the honor to work with people that we normally cannot work with. They wouldn't work for us, the government. If you look into who work with on the Corona Check project, you, for example, will see a lot of members from Hack 42. People that work 60 hours a week, completely open, but support the government in fighting the pandemic. And why do they join, or why do they stay? Next slide. By cutting the crap the government normally introduces, lots of talk, less doing. And next slide. By cutting hierarchy, by not having to get the other people above you to grant you the permission to continue, but by having people do what they're good at without bothering them with hierarchy. Next slide. By aiming for the highest in everything we do. For example, next slide. In privacy, we aim for the highest. I'll come into that when I'm discussing Corona Check later on. Next slide, please. In accessibility, everything we do is accessible to the max for people that are blind, for people that are handicapped, etc. For the apps, the websites, etc. There is no concession as to privacy, and there is no concession as to accessibility. Next slide, please. There also is no concession as to how open we work. Everything we do is published on GitHub. So now I'll enter the realm of Corona Check. Next slide, please. Corona Check was not started for the digital Corona certificate that the EU introduced. It was started for domestic certificates, where at the end of last year, Dutch scientists advised us to come to a certificate that proves that the chance you have the virus is at a minimum level before entering events. And the Netherlands, and most of you will know that, introduced a law to support that that way of working. Next slide, please. And what if you design such a system from the bottom up? First of all, you would want privacy and security by design. So there is no central registration. There is only one place where your QR code is, and that's in the app. But you would also not want people to be linkable, traveling from one pub to the other or from one event to the other. So new QR codes are generated every few minutes and even faster from now on. But that, of course, is not possible on paper, but that's possible in the app. And you will want to balance fraud prevention and privacy. For example, having had a test is a delicate medical information. So you would not want everyone at a bar to be able to know exactly who you are and to get a database of all of that. And then you would want the utmost as to accessibility. You would have it You would want it to be usable for the majority of the Dutch population, including these people without mobile devices, and you would want a offline use also. And thirdly, we want it to be open, completely transparent, usable for everyone, and verification possible for everyone. Next slide, please. And the last two, you would want, and there is a kill switch. There is a kill switch in Corona Melder, and there is a kill switch in Corona Check, and from that moment on, it won't work. So the government can stop it at once. And you will want to prevent abuse. Can I have the next slide, please? So in the domestic QR, and if you are on premise, that's the one you showed. These are the data that's in it. The first letter of your surname and your forename, and the day and month of birth. It might even be less. If your first letter of surname and forename are not that one of them may be left out. So the only information you show at the bar is your initials and in your day and month of birth. And that's the way we balance fraud prevention and privacy. Next slide, please. But then the EU decided to come up with the digital Corona certificate to facilitate a cross-border use to return to free movement and to make that interoperable with worldwide initiatives. And as the EU did that the first in the world, it'll probably be the way that other countries will work too. Next slide, please. And the EU decided to make it digital and paper-based, as we did in the Netherlands, with an interoperable barcode, information in readable form also, and with a trust framework. But the point is, each member state verifies against their own business rules. So each member state has to have the data itself. Next slide, please. So the difference between on the right, the domestic QR code I showed you before, and that was designed with privacy in mind, completely in mind, compares to the 3 different data sets you can show in a DCC in this way. There is a lot of data in the DCC because every member state will have to have that data to validate their own business rules. Next slide, please. So that in Corona Check, you all used the holder app, the Corona Check app itself, in which you can store both the domestic QR code and the international codes. There is a scanner for events, for domestic events, the Corona Check Scanner app, and the Ministry of Infrastructure designed their own app, which is the DCC scanner that scans the international QR code that has all the data in it. Next slide, please. And that is what we then designed. People get tested, they download the app, they retrieve a negative test certificate, and later on we introduced also recovery certificates and vaccination certificate. The app itself generates a certificate that now not shows what the source is, so the QR code that you all used to get into the event does not show if you're vaccinated, if you are recovered from COVID-19, or you had a negative test, but it only shows that you are safe to enter. And on the verifier side, you would download the Corona Check Scanner app, and everyone can download that app, and then you start scanning. So you get access with either a negative test or a recovery or a vaccination, and the people at the door will not know what the source of that was. Next slide, please. In the visual example, but you all have the app, I guess, this is how it works. Next slide, please. So for the domestic QR code, at the door, you will only see that you were valid to enter. Next slide, please. So either you have a valid code or the code is not valid, and there may be many reasons for that. For example, it is too old. Next slide. And on the DCC side, if you show the European QR, there is a lot of data in it, your full name, your birth date, etc. And the reason for that is that at the border, the country of entrance can validate against the own business rules, so they have to have that data. Next slide, please. The portfolio all those people work on is not those two apps only. We have Corona Check, the app, we have the Corona Check scanner, but then CoronaCheck.nl also is a print portal. So it's the web version of the Corona Check app on which you can generate your QR codes on PDF. But there are many people working in healthcare that have to be able to provide a QR code on paper for those people whose data cannot be found by the app. So we developed a separate website, including all of the methods to identify healthcare professionals and to safely hand out access codes to be able to, for those people to generate a QR code on paper. This is not a simple website. There's a lot of work behind that. We also developed a viewing and staging area for all of the RIVM data, the Dutch professionals that were the vaccination data for scientific research and is stored. And we helped them building a database for that. We also developed the backend signing services for the Netherlands, but also Curaçao, Sint Maarten, and Aruba that sign the QR codes to be able to check for other member states in the EU that those QR codes are valid. We have a interactive voice response system for people that are not having a computer, and they can enter their citizen number, and they'll get their QR code on paper via snail mail. So we also developed printing and sending that QR codes via snail mail. We have to manage a lot of connected labs, many more than just a few, dozens of those. We have 24/7 monitoring, red teaming, and security operations to monitor that system. And we have people working on the international relations and the standardization work within and outside the EU. Next slide, please. My main, and some of you will actually know what this stands for. My main takeoff of my main, what I learned from the past a year and a half is that within government, you normally would ask the market, ask companies to produce stuff like this. And you only can do that if you actually precisely know what you do. So the block of Bert Hubert on the toaster is my main takeoff, all that work. Thanks.